my man.
Man, I love it when you're on demand like this.
Oh, man. I'm just ready, right?
I know. You've been ready since we left Red Bicycle this morning.
Well, I had a little break there. I had to do my deck work.
Oh. How's that going for you? Tell me a little bit about the old hammies.
When you're ripping out deck boards, it is a hell of a workout for your hammies and your lower back. I don't know. They're just, they feel a lot worse than they did after the Chattanooga, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is that? What do you feel like that says? That your deck work, or do you feel like it just means you've gotten a little soft?
Certainly I'm getting soft. There's no doubt about it. That's why I said after that race, I think I need to hit the weights. I need to start doing some strength stuff because, you know, I can ride a bike, but I can't do anything that's like manly. But now that I put the deck in, I feel like I've got the jump start I needed.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to share a funny story here for a minute that happened to me over the weekend. I was texting about it with Nick, one of my athletes, and I went out for a run on Sunday, and you know it's in Nashville right now, so it's super hot. You know, like into May, early June, and you know, ran well, and then you know, I'm sure you saw on Facebook, like it popped up, a little snake popped up towards the end of my run, and literally, you know, scared the shit out of me.
Jesus.
And so I stopped, you know, did a few pictures, and this happens to me sometimes on my runs. Is I'll go for these really long runs, and if I ever stop, whether it's to like check my phone or see if Allie called or whatever, if I stand around for too long, like my stomach just ends up like turning into like knots.
Really?
Yeah, and it'll just like super GI issues. And so I like do another mile, and I'm like, oh man, I have got to go to the bathroom. And I was like, man, I'm 2 miles away from the nearest porta-john, which is back to the beginning of the trailhead. So I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna. You got two options: either take it easy and don't, you know, cause too much more damage, or you just try to sprint and get there as quickly as you can. And at that point, it just kind of hurts no matter what. So I sprint. I make it there just by we'll just say it was a close call.
And door flying open, sit down.
Door flying open. I was just praying. I mean, I picked it up and probably ran like a 4:30 mile the last like quarter because I was so scared somebody was gonna like leisurely stroll up and like like open the porta-john door and walk in.
Oh no! You saw it in the distance and it was open.
And so I just took off. Yeah, it took off, and I hoped it was open. And I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't. And get in there and you know and you know and take care of business, and there's no toilet paper.
Oh Jesus!
So my first thought is no problem. I got Swiftwick socks.
Oh, you got to go to the sock, right?
I went sockless.
Well,
so I'm in a dilemma. It's and you know what porta-john is, and like in the heat, it's like sauna meets steam room like multiplied.
Yeah.
And I had to make a decision. Do I just saddle back up and meander on out like nothing ever happened, or do I went with the shirt.
What?
Yeah, it was my only option. It was one of my favorite shirts too.
Are you kidding me right now?
I had to. I just didn't. I was about to get back in the car with leather seats, and it just didn't sit right. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to be slipping and sliding on the car on the way home, going down Bellamy Boulevard. So I get home and I tell Allie, and she didn't see me when I left, and so when I went and did as I got my dirty clothes up in our room, and I put it in the pile and refused to tell her what shirt it was. And so I just shoved it in the washer. So now, unbeknownst to her, there is some shirt that I still own that was washed and cleaned, and that I'll actually probably wear again. It's one of my favorite shirts, and she won't have any idea which one it is.
Oh man, you weren't wearing that today, were you? When I saw you,
never know.
That's one of your faves.
That's one of my favorites. You never know.
Oh man.
I will preface it. It's one of my favorite running shirts.
Okay.
So, if it's cotton, you can you can rest assured you're probably safe. It's not the Turd Trail Tech Tee that I'm rocking. So anyway, I figured that'd be a fun story to share, and I think it's always good for people to remember that everybody has, funny stories like that. And like I say, your training days aren't going to be perfect, so live and learn. And I'll never trust that Porta John again.
Well, there you are, and nobody can say you don't learn anything on this podcast.
That's true. That is true. Because I actually went back to that same place today and ran, and I went and checked that Porta John before I started my run. No toilet paper.
Oh man!
So it's just turned into a number one only option. So
obviously though, that's kind of just warming you up because you got to carry, man.
I know. So anyway, but enough about my training pitfalls and hilarity, and let's talk about some power.
Yeah, so if you're still here listening, my head, we're going to talk about power, and my head, I feel like, is, if I may quote Ross from the private or the closed Facebook group, my head feels like it's about to explode. Or is it not so much on this one?
Yeah, it's not gonna. I'm gonna do like I'm gonna do a slow drip. So we had and these kind of both go together. And again, if you're a frequent listener and you like to engage and ask questions and be part of the community, please hop on Facebook and like our Crushing Iron Facebook page, and then also search Crushing Iron Group. It's our closed community group of podcast listeners, and we have a good time in there and talk about good stuff, and it's positive and uplifting. But anyway, it's also a great place for us to get podcast topics and really service our listeners. And so I think it was Erica Jerkowski, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that last name right, Erica J. And she said that wanted us to do a podcast called "I've Got the Power," all about power meters and how to effectively use them. She has one, and she says, "I just know I don't know how to use it properly." So, Erica, we're going to deliver.
Yeah, and you said that's real common, right? I mean, I could see that happening with me. I'd put a power meter on there and be like,
"Oh man,
I just have an expensive pedal," or
pedometer, whatever you want to call it. I used to call it an expensive cat eye. Everybody has like the old cat eye beginner little cadences. I did cadence if you wanted, but it's mostly just speed, and that's what people have. I mean, and you see it more now because they've become so affordable, and that's where we're going to start with the different types of power meters. Like where this is very entry level, dipping your toe into what is and how can a power meter help you. And so this is more of a part one. And then the next podcast that we do on power will be more of a deep dive. So this is kind of a entry level, all things power, surface level, and then we'll go deep dive next. But I feel like it's important to talk to the beginner and then merge our way to the deep stuff so we everybody can learn kind of on the same thing. It's always good for people to hear over again as well. Mm-hmm. So a power meter, and there's a million companies that make them. And what a power meter does is it effectively measures the amount of power you can actually put out. And you'll hear this adage a lot from people. It's like, well, heart rate is subjective, but power is power. It is what it is. You can push it or you can't, regardless of your heart rate. It's going to show exactly what you can push no matter what. So what it does is it just effectively measures the power output of the rider. What a lot of them do now is they use strain gauges to measure the torque applied. They use it either via the crank, like companies like SRAM, or now you're seeing a lot of companies go with like the inside the pedal. Personally, I love SRAM and what they do from a component standpoint, and I actually purchased a long time ago one of their very first SRAM power meters when they integrated into the crank. I currently have and love my my hub-based power meter. It's, a lot of people think it's old school per se because it's not one of the newer ones, but it's just one of those Power Tap G3 hubs, and I love it for a couple reasons. One, it's inside the hub, so I feel like it's protected. The only thing I not that they're not accurate because you can always calibrate them, is that a lot of athletes, cyclists, and especially triathletes are going to end up putting their bike down at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You drop it, whether you wreck it, whatever it is, and if you drop it on that side or against the pedal, I'm just not sure how accurate these are going to be. And even the companies that put these out, there can be so Mike, I could put you on like a Power Tap, for example, is a hub based one. Then you could go and you could ride the same effort on that, and then go ride a SRAM power meter, and then go ride more like the Garmin Vector pedal based power meters, and then maybe use like one of the Pioneer ones. You could be doing the same effort, and there's going to be a variance.
Okay.
Some of them are traditionally like known for reading really, really high, which to explain it in short is they're all going to have some sort of discrepancy within 1 to 5% usually of what the power reading actually is. What you want is you just want it to be consistently wrong. Does that make sense? If it's going to be between 1 and 5% off, you want it to always be 1 to 5% off.
Okay.
Because if it's that, then it essentially is accurate to a point. Because you're always going to get the same feedback. It might not be true, but it will at least show you what you're pushing on a kind of an accurate level.
All right, that's like me setting my clock ahead.
Exactly. You know what? You could probably say that. Hopefully the power meter works a little bit better for you when it comes to that. But so that's kind of like a quick intro into power meters, and they all sync with your Garmin or Sunto or maybe even your Apple Watch. Who knows these days, or whatever GPS device head unit you choose to have. And the reason a lot of people get them is, and now that they're as cheap as like $300 or $400, which they used to always be like at least over $1,000, like you're always looking at having a comma, is a lot of people say, well, they like seeing how hard they can push. Like everybody, you watch the Tour de France, and especially now with how live and everything is like real time, they'll show you like what a current athlete is pushing. Some of these guys are insane pushing numbers, which they're doped up to their gills more than likely, so it's totally off what you should even be shooting for. But people like numbers. Most people who get into triathlon like numbers. They like technology, they like gear, they like numbers, they like data. I mean, that's like one of the more fun parts of the sport. Forget like, hard work and dedication and grunt stuff. That's like, who wants to do that? Let's talk about gear and power and watts and all this kind of stuff. It's more fun because, it's we can sound smart. Mm-hmm. And while you may sound smart, if you're not using it to your abilities and the reason and what you paid for, then you're just getting jack crap out of it. And I think that's what a lot of athletes are actually getting. It is not much.
Okay. So I know we've talked about this before, but I mean, is it important to even kind of go back and talk about how to get good power, like a test?
How to purchase one, or how to do a bike test to get a good starting standpoint? Yeah,
I mean, is that important to kind of go through that first or later?
Yes, no, that's actually a great topic into what was like, which was another question we had in the closed group was about what this metric called chronic training load, and what I talked about in that thread was what is a good test. What is a functional threshold power test, which is what kind of the standard testing is for most athletes. They'll do what they call a functional threshold test, and they either do usually one of two things. a 20-minute all-out test. Actually, they'll do a couple things. What the test is supposed to give you is the power you can put out for 1 hour of straight time trial. The difficulty in asking somebody to do that is, one, if I told you to go out and push really, really hard for an hour on the trainer uninterrupted to see what you could get, you'd be like, hell no. Like, that sounds miserable. I mean, there's variables, but it's like, you're going to have music, you want to have a fan to help cool you off, you're not going to be motivated. So what they've tried to do is, and Andrew Coggin has kind of been on the forefront of creating a lot of this technology and statistics and data points, is created tests that simulate that based on a percentage. So what I would do is, let's say one test is you go out and you do 20 minutes all out after whatever warm up it is you want to do.
Okay.
If you do a 20-minute test, then a lot of people would say, well, you want to take 90% of that power number. So let's say it's 1,000 for easy math. Then your power is going to be 900 of what you should estimated to be for your actual functional threshold power for an hour. Do you follow me?
Yeah, I am.
So you do the 20-minute test and you do 1,000 watts, and that's a crazy number. So don't think you can do it. I'm just using it for quick math. For quick math's sake. You would then do 1,000 times 0.9, and then you'll get your actual functional threshold power. Another method is to do 2 20-minute power tests with like a 5-minute easy in between, and then take the average of both of those. Okay. So it's not really an hour, and you're still doing some of it fatigued. But so let's say you did 220 for the first one and 210 for the second one. They would say your functional threshold power for an hour would be right around 215. Okay. So now you have a starting point.
And when you're doing these, what gear are you in, or like how do you know what's all out?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And I think a question that goes to the answer I gave to this gentleman on the closed group is that these tests are so subjective based on how fresh you are, how motivated you are, how much sleep you got, how much caffeine you got, if you're even feeling good that day. And so so planning, a lot of it is also based, I think, on you personally. And that's why these power meters and these, running with power, which I think is ridiculous, and heart rate thing, they're all great, but none of it is useful unless you yourself take your own kind of, what I would say, like your personal inventory. So I had an athlete that I just talked to on the phone, Rocky, who lives in Minnesota, and we just started working together, and he's got an Olympic race coming next weekend. So instead of doing any training, or not any training, any tests, I'm just going to use the data I get from that race.
Okay.
To more than likely establish his initial zones. But what I told him is if you have a really crappy day, I need to know, because guess what? Those zones mean absolutely nothing because you had a terrible day. I also want to know if you feel like you had the race of your life. Because if you had the race of your life, guess what? I'm not going to base your future numbers on that race. Because if it's a race of a lifetime, guess what? If I asked you to do it the next day, it would have been less. So am I going to plan your next 4 to 6 weeks on some like anomaly on one end of the spectrum? No. I'm probably actually going to be conservative and take 5 or 10% off. And let's start there, because the fact of the matter is, Mike, is that nobody has ever gotten hurt from taking it just a little bit easier. And so that's where like the testing becomes subjective. Did I have a good day? Did I not have a good day? Did I have a fan in front of me on the trainer? Or did I not? I mean, that right there could have a huge difference. But from a pacing standpoint, when you're pacing these 20-minute tests, I would like to break it down this kind of simply. The first 8 minutes, you should build up to what's going to be hard. If you're looking at the clock, it should feel like it's going, relatively quick and relatively under control. From minutes 8 to 16, you should feel like when you look down at the clock every intermittently, all right, time's creeping by a little slow. That's how your effort should feel. And then the last 4 minutes, you should feel like the clock is moving backwards.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like you feel like you've been going for 4 minutes. You look down, you've been going for a minute and a half. Like that's how hard you should be going. The most difficult part of this is pacing. I had the same athlete that I was telling my colorful story to earlier, Nick. I had him do a test, his first 20-minute kind of test on the bike, and it's his very first one. So pacing is really, really hard. And if you don't pace it well, then just scrap it and try again next week. It's not a do or die. Don't just feel like you're married to this number for the rest of the training block for the next 8 weeks, however long you're going to go in between tests. But what I did was I looked at his average heart rate for that 20-minute test, and then later in the week I kind of snuck in a workout that also included a 20-minute all-out, and his numbers were exactly right. Like literally exactly on point, which they should be. So what I knew is that whether he went all out physiologically in the first one or in the second one, it is what it is. That's the effort that he can give, and that's the number he's going to get. So I knew that he did it right. If he had done, a 220 for his test, and then in this workout 2 days later he did like a 240. All right, we're going to go with the 240. Because you obviously didn't pace it correctly in the first one. But again, it's trial and error. And if you're listening to this podcast and you've trained with power at all, or you've done one of these tests, you know how difficult it is to pace 20 minutes. I mean, it's really, really hard, and you'll never get it the first try. It just comes with practice, and you can't be afraid to just bag it and say, you know what, don't bag it because you didn't do as well as you thought. Bag it because you feel like you didn't pace it. Because again, a slightly more conservative pace that yields a 220 is much better than you get into the 16, 17-minute mark and you're averaging 220, and then you end up fading down to a 215 because you blew your load.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I mean, all along what you've been saying, it just sounds to me like if you're just getting going on this, you might, as much as it might suck, you might have to do a few of these in the beginning just to kind of get an accurate number.
True. I mean, and that's the other point is that I made to this gentleman earlier was, if I tested you today, I would literally just assume that you did everything right versus doing these tests. Like he was ready to do his test now. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. Let's look at doing a test 4 to 8 weeks from now, because then what I have is this portfolio of training that I can look back on and say, all right, man, you nailed these. This is kind of where I thought you would be. We're on the right track. Or you either just tanked it or you blew it out of the water, which regardless of what end you go, I can look back and say, all right, but here's what I believe you can consistently do. So it's usually gonna lie one way or the other, up or down, but you have to have that objectivity of either having a coach or just that mindset to where, well, if I look back in my training, I've got this, and we'll talk in later on in podcast number 2 about other types of software like WKO Plus that Training Peaks provides that actually almost allows you to not even test. It just will calculate your power and numbers through a certain course of workouts and basically say, hey man, it's time to jump up your threshold. Or like a very popular software is Trainer Road. It gives you these workouts and you do these different intervals, different sets, and you might have a functional threshold of 200 input into the system, and then you might do one of their 20-minute intervals, a couple weeks later, and you've gotten stronger, and you did 210, and it's going to pop up a little icon that says, time to raise your threshold, because it's obvious,
okay.
Stuff like that. It's just there's so many factors to take in. It's just it's a lot of data mining. If you want it to be. Again, it doesn't have to be. You can use it without getting that. It doesn't have to be as complex as people say it does, but it's also not nearly as simplistic and useless as most people use it for, just as a power. It should be used to train appropriately, to maximize fitness, and then ultimately it should be used to help you execute a plan so you can run your best off the bike. It's a governor.
Which brings me to my question.
Yeah,
I was going to ask, since we're on this, and I don't know exactly where you want to go.
You're driving this train, man. I'm just listening and answering.
Well, let's say my functional power is 200. Right?
Okay.
Now, I assume there are rules of thumb based on distances, right? Is that kind of how it works? Like if I go to Ironman, this and the half Ironman, then you kind of prescribe a certain percentage of that? Is that what goes on?
That is true.
Okay.
And so we actually covered this on a previous, briefly, on a podcast before, but I'll be happy to go over it again. Generally speaking, and this is general, and I could put a disclaimer that could last 30 minutes for all things power or any of this, but sprint distance, don't even look at it. Just go balls out.
Okay.
Olympic distance, a little different. You can't go all out for just over an hour for most people at 100% and expect to run your best 10K. So most people would say between 90 to 95% is a pretty conservative, not conservative, but is a pretty good range. So, so that would, so if your functional threshold is, what'd you say it was, 200?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting ready for, an Olympic, I'm going to say, all right, Mike, you need to average 180. That's 90% of yours. So what you're doing is you're going to have a field on your Garmin that says, average power, and we'll get to normalized power later, which is a more important number in my opinion. But you're going to have average power, and you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to shoot for holding around a 180 because I know based on my numbers, that's what I should be able to hold. Now, caveat is, did you train that way? Like if you haven't trained at all anywhere close to 90%, then you might want to go on the more conservative side and go like maybe 175. Nobody ever went down a few watts and complained that they ran worse. It doesn't work that way. As far as 70.3, so let's say you're rocking on it, you're still at your 200 watts threshold and you're going to Muncie. This is where you start to get a couple of variants on individuals. The higher your threshold gets, the more flexibility you have to push your percentage. And the reason for that is because you're going to be on the course less time.
Okay.
So the stress you're accumulating and the heart rate and the time and everything, you're not going to be having to deal with it and suffer through it as long. So let's say you're at 200. I would say between 80% and 85 is where I would recommend. 85 is on the high end.
Okay.
So conservative, let's say 80%. So we're looking at an average power of 160.
Okay.
Now, if you're a really, really strong cyclist, and let's say you have a functional threshold power of 320, once you get up to that level, then you can flirt with that 85% and average like 272. And the reason for that is because you're probably, based on those power numbers, going to be on just the bike course anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes less than the other person. So do you see where I'm headed here? Is that stress is stress. You're going to be on the course a little bit less.
Yeah. Now I know that it's not supposed to matter, right? But it must matter. Like Muncie's a super flat course, so it's got to be easier to hit that. You know what I mean? And you're probably going to get into that a little bit because you got to keep it there. Even obviously the hills, you're going to push it a little higher sometimes just because it's a hill, but
you're going to lose it on the downhill. Is the thing.
Okay.
You're gonna, and we'll get into that in a second. But Ironman racing between 65 and 75, is 75 is on the high end. So for you, if we went 65, or if we went 65% of 200, you'd be looking at an average power of 130. Now, to go to your question, where I think you were headed, was, a flat course like Muncie, you're going to be a little bit faster because of the lack in elevation. The roads are perfectly paved. There's no traffic. You can flirt with the higher end, but you're and this will be a good place for us to jump into normalized power. And this is probably where we'll end it. Because I think we've already kind of just shoveled a crap ton of information out there, and we'll let it sink in and go deeper next time. But what normalized power is, or in short, what your NP is what it does is it calculates your surges to tell you what. So let's say I have you go average 200 watts. That's your goal.
Okay.
But you're going to have surges of 400. Or let's say 300, surges of 300 because you're going up a hill. And then you're going to have areas of going like on gradual declines where you're only able to average 100 because you're just running out of gears. Mm-hmm. So what it does is it takes into account those drops and also those surges, and it tells you what your body is quote unquote supposed to feel like it just did. So, for example, Corey, old CC, who just did Chattanooga, my goal for him was to try to keep his normalized power. You always want to keep your normalized power and your average power at least within 10, if not 5. 5 is like perfect. Because what happens is, and this is really tricky for a course like Wisconsin, which is the reason why I was pretty happy with how I paced it, was there are so many hills. I mean, you know what it was like. Like I was pushing sometimes, like I was trying to average 195 or 200 watts for the course, but there was going up some of those hills, I was pushing like 600 because I had no other choice. Because if I didn't, I was going to fall over. Yeah. And those huge surges where you go way, way, way above your quote unquote threshold is when you start to do damage, as far as negatively speaking, because in a race that's long, like 70.3 or anything longer, you don't ever want to get there, because once you start to produce lactic acid, there ain't no going back. And it's going to take you a while to flush it out of your system. And so that toll it does on your body, it is a lot higher. And so what that NP is telling you is what I feel like in my mind when I see normalized power. It says, all right, you average 200 numerically, but the toll on your body was 210.
Okay.
And that's what happens is, like, you get people that will average 195, but they were so impatient, whether it was going past somebody or trying to catch somebody or going up a hill, that their average power might be 190 and they feel like that's good, but their normalized power was 220.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
your body feels that 220, which for a person whose average power was 190, 220 is light years away. From the zone they should have been in order to run well. And so that's where, recognizing that and seeing those numbers and realizing what they mean, but B, more importantly, what they mean collectively, and how you pace races, and if you have a super flat course like Muncie, you have zero excuses besides just bad judgment if you go anywhere over 5 to 7 difference in normalized power, because it's flat. You should be head down, same zone, same effort, same power the whole time, less a surge here or there coming out of a corner or a sharp turn, where you're going to have a little bit. But again, we don't want you to get up out of your saddle and bust out a 15, 20-meter sprint. It spikes it up to, 600 or 700. That stuff does damage.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No,
sorry, man.
No, you said it. I just want to get it while we got it. But the getting out of your saddle thing has always been curious to me, because I see that all the time. So stupid. So that you're going to, yeah. I've always thought that, and I don't do it really unless it's very, absolutely necessary. But so that's kind of what's happening. They don't realize it, right? They're busting up all these hills out of their saddle.
Pros do it, and top end age groupers do it because guess what? They've trained for it. And for pros, you're going for money. It's a whole different ball game. But for age groupers, and you and you see this on hilly courses, is you see people get up out of their saddle and just go to town.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, I wonder how many times you did that in training. 0.
Yeah.
I have these workouts that I put in for specific athletes, depending on what course you're doing, called power starts, and they're basically 15 to maybe max 20-second bursts from a standstill.
Okay.
So they stop, they're on their trainer, and they literally stop, and then what they're supposed to do is get out of the saddle and sprint for 15 to 20 seconds. So what they're doing is they're getting a good workout because they're going high, but then they get that feeling of, oh man, if I just did this in a race, I'm effed. Like I'm not going to be able to, or I'm going to be, my effort and my pace and power is going to be compromised because I just did this. So when you get on courses like Wisconsin and Louisville and Lake Placid, and you see these people get up out of the saddle, and they're just crushing. They're going anaerobic. They're doing things to their body, and and that's where you bring in workouts like I'm a huge fan in many different avenues, but of big gear work. The purpose of big gear work is, yes, it's multifaceted. I could go on for hours about the benefits of big gear work and how it translates to both cycling and running. But especially for individuals racing courses that are hilly, your body needs to be trained to withstand those surges and comfortable withstanding them.
Okay.
And that's what you're, in a way, in a much broader sense, training your body to do, is making it more resilient. So when you have those, you're still in the saddle. You're not getting up, but you're still going to have to, go down to a bigger gear and push 50 to 60 cadence to keep the speed and the effort that you want to keep without going anaerobic and without totally blowing your load. So there's a conservative, smart, and patient route to take, and then there's the anxious, impatient, often driven by ego route, which is, I'm getting on my side, I'm going to pound this, I'm going to get to the top, and then I'm probably going to coast for at least the next 3 or 4 miles because I'm just crushed. And so it's not a different school of thought. It's just a different mindset that you take into it, but it has a huge effect.
Well, while we're talking about that too, the idea of coasting down a hill sometimes, and I think we haven't necessarily talked, but I've heard there's sort of like a 30 mile an hour kind of barrier that, my question, I guess, is how much does it help you recover a little bit? I mean, is that like a legit concept?
Personally, that's a tough one. Personally, what I think, I think that going downhill recovers you from an aspect of letting you spin out your legs easy. For me, it's not a heart rate thing. It's like you just probably did like a higher torque, a higher strength, a lower cadence. And so you're getting that, that real heavy feeling. So now what you're doing is just letting you kind of spin with no tension. And yeah, you're going to recover, but I'm a huge fan of 2 things: pushing the uphill on the bike and pushing the downhill on the run. For me, that's your best bang for the buck. I just don't. You get much more return on investment from pushing. Now, when I say pushing, I'm talking smart and appropriate pushing uphill than pounding pedal strokes and mashing on your gears trying to go downhill when, you're probably sitting up because you can't handle going 40 miles an hour, or you have horrible aero position, and you might get 1 more mile an hour if you're even lucky. Because inertia and the speed you already created coming over that hill is already doing it for you. It's just better bang for your buck, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. I wasn't sure because I know that I've read, especially because when I was getting ready for Wisconsin the first time, a lot of people suggested spinning up and then coasting down as a recovery tool. I mean, that could be like beginner, first time. Don't, go out of your deal if you don't know what the heck you're doing. But
I mean, again,
it's not optimum. I get that,
right, but it's also not bad advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great advice, but it's not bad. It's conservative advice.
Yes.
You're not gonna it's not gonna ruin anybody's race, or it's not gonna get them hurt, or they're not gonna have to, quit. But it's about training, and especially once you get long distance, and then this goes with everything, is you race with the horse you trained on. And so if you've trained by spinning up easy on hills and coasting the downhills, then race that way. Don't try to become something you're not on race day. Now, if you train to withstand those surges to go up the hill, then do that in race day because you train for it. But just don't try to be something you're not. When it comes to race day, because that's honestly I know we're kind of going off subject, but that's probably a good way to end it. Is it ruins more races than anything else, is trying to be somebody you didn't train to be on race day.
Yeah, I think that's really great.
And can I touch on one super quick thing real quick?
Sure.
Before we close it out, I got an email today from one of our awesome listeners, Angela Peterson. And she had some awesome things to say about the podcast, but she touched on the fact that we really encourage people to take their time when it comes to doing an Ironman. It's not something you have to jump into. And so her thing was kind of like, I'm kind of regretting. I'm excited to do the full, but I wish I would have waited. Listen. Yes. Do we encourage people to, making this sound like virginity, or do we encourage people to wait? Sure, we do. Because I think it's just better from an athlete's life cycle standpoint, to learn as much as they can and slowly grow. But if you find yourself in that position that you're like, man, I wish I would have waited. Like, remember, unless you're planning on this being your last one ever, then yeah, will it be ideal to be in your first year? Probably not. But guess what? In year number 2, you'll already be ahead of the game. You'll have learned a lot. You'll have had a good experience. You'll know what to expect. So it's, I'm doing it this year. Don't expect it to be, glitter and fireworks and pom-poms. But remember that this is supposed to be fun. And so just kind of reframe your mindset, and say, hey, your number one goal, regardless of when you sign up, is to be happy and excited when you get to the start line. Most people burn out mentally and emotionally much longer before they end up physically, getting burnt out. But so if you find yourself in that place, just kind of do a reframe. Remember why you signed up in the first place. Get after it, no matter what. And again, just make sure you're having fun with it. Don't put expectations on yourself that will make you resent any aspect of the sport. So
yeah, and don't race on the horse that you didn't train on. And
you like that one, huh?
I do like that because it's you can't. I mean, that's one way to really make that a miserable day. And if you're going to go out there and, like you're saying, try to enjoy it and really experience the feelings that you're going to get and the whole deal, it's best to just ease into it as much as you can, and then hopefully you've got too much left towards the end, and then you can burn. You know what I mean? It's just so much better to approach the whole day like that, I think.
Yep, totally agree. And it's like we say it all the time, but there is no such thing as a good bike followed by a bad run.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
There's nothing. It just means you overbiked. Mm-hmm. It's so however you want to spin it.
Well, that's what'd you say? That's about 90% of mistakes made in triathlon.
Gosh, yeah. Yeah, I'm being generous.
Hey, man, we got a lot of really nice comments today in the group. I just want to thank everybody for putting that out there, and also for getting behind Peak Performance, that book, because we're not even kidding when we said that we just really like that book, and I think you're going to like it too. We had a lot of pre-orders, it looks like, to help those guys out, so that was super cool, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's going to help them out a ton. More importantly, it's going to help our listeners out a ton.
Yeah.
For everybody to listen to it, I mean, it really was a game changer for me in a lot of areas, and I'd love for us to do, you and I do like a follow-up cast, a couple weeks down the road, about what the specific impact it's had on our life and where we can kind of see, the results kind of showing themselves. And I do, again, and you just said it, but the comments that we got today, and then we continue to get via email, I couldn't be, it makes this whole experience awesome. Thank you guys so much for all the positive comments, and we wouldn't be here without our listeners. And so the feedback and the communication, the interaction has really made this a really awesome experience for I know both of us. So if we accept all feedback, just not the positive stuff. If you got any suggestions, let it rip. And we'll do our best as long as we can stay and keep ourselves authentic. But again, thanks to everybody that's listened and giving us a great review, and looking forward to our next one already.
Yeah, me too. Do we know what it is? We have some ideas.
Yeah, we do. I may let the power one marinate for a little bit longer than a couple days. So we may have one as a tweener, and then do the follow up with a deeper dive, and make some more heads explode the next time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think I'd let this sink in, because now I got a better grip on what power does and what it is and all that sort of stuff, and now we can start thinking about how to actually put it into action with the equipment and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that's that. I'm gonna go back and work on my deck.
Yeah, work on those hammies. I'm gonna go downstairs and eat some dinner and watch a little bit of the Preds. But
the Preds are on your team.
I mean, hey man, I feel like we moved to Kansas City and the Royals won the championship. I'm hoping we can do the same here.
Yeah, it's gonna be nuts. You want to go down there tonight and hang out?
No.
Wait, no, it's not. They're not in town. Well, yeah, but they're all still down there.
Everybody's downtown getting their party on. That's just I ain't got time for that.
No, I'm just kidding. That's the last place I want. In fact, I'm leaving town.
That's right. You're getting out of here before they. Man, can you imagine your side of town, Preds and CMA Fest?
Oh, jeez.
Bye, Felicia. I'm out of here.
All right, let's wrap it up. Go get your power on.
Yep, go get your power on, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
See you, dude. Yep, see you.